Good evening, everyone. Author R. Weir, Randy. Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. Another episode of Bringing Life to Characters, where we ask that question of all of our authors. And one of these days, I got to get some music for my intro. They have some stock music with the software, but I haven't liked any of it yet. So maybe I'll have to find some royalty-free music to throw on that and be a little more fancy. But my guest tonight, I know from Killer Nashville from many, many years. He wasn't able to make it this year, but he is usually there and on a lot of panels. And I'm going to bring him up on the screen. We've got Dale T. Phillips on. Hi, Dale. How you doing?
Howdy.
You know, I noticed on your website you talked about there's a lot of Dale Phillips out there, and you were
I
like,
didn't know that when
"I'm
I
Dale
started.
T. Phillips."
Yeah, there's a boxer, there's an actor, there's a soccer player, there's a guy who sells farm equipment, there's poker players, there's all these incarnations of me out there, but they're all different. And when you do a search, there's such a mix. You put the T in, and I got like the first 8 pages on Google under Dale T. Phillips, so that's what I have to go with.
Well, in that search engine, you know, you want to try to be at the top if you can, and I
Yeah,
noticed
yeah.
that when I type it, yeah, you if you put that T in there, you're right there.
Gotta know
That's
how
what
to
you
how
got
to
to do.
play the algorithms.
That's right. Keep keep Google honest, right? So tell us a little about yourself, the important stuff that people need to know about you.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, my tagline is scary books and murderous crooks because I write
Okay.
crime and mystery. I write some horror fiction since I did have Stephen King as a writing instructor in college way back when. And that inspired me to be a writer. I was also on Jeopardy in 1993. If people can, some people aren't even born yet listening to this, but that was it. Totally different game under Alex Trebek.
Right.
And let's see, I've been in an independent movie. I've been on some TV, uh, done a lot of acting, been to all 50 states. And now I just write since having retired last year and write and try to help other writers be happy, successful, and productive.
Well, those three together would be a good combination. Most authors don't necessarily get all three of
It's
those, but
pretty rare, yeah.
So, so it sounds like you've done a lot in your life. I saw on your website too about all the different jobs you've had through
Oh
the
boy, yeah.
years. Long list. So, which one was your favorite, and which one was your least favorite of all? And you had a pretty good list there, maybe like 15 or 20 of them. So,
Yeah, and the thing is I didn't set out to do that. Saying, wow, this is great background for a writer. It just accidentally came that way. And when I started writing, having had that experience was tremendous because all these different strata of society, all different economic levels, all different people from all different social areas all came together. I got, oh boy, so many fun things. One of the fun things was a lab research subject. I was near Harvard in the William James building, and I would go and I'd volunteer for these psychological tests. And it was great. They didn't pay a lot, but it was certainly entertaining, and I certainly learned a lot. And some of them were just kind of fun.
a
Oh boy.
human lab rat, huh?
Yes, I was a human lab rat. Exactly. That was great. Holiday Santa was difficult because sometimes you get the kids in your lap and you hope they don't pee, and sometimes they're crying, and you got to try to make it a good experience for them. So I had a friend who learned sign language, and a kid came in and he used it because the kid was deaf, and his mother cried because she said that's the first time he's been able to talk to Santa. And I'm just like, oh, that moves me so much. It's like, to
Right.
do that for someone and just make their experience when they're shut off from so much of the world was great.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people are scared of Santa. I don't know if it's the outfit, the beard, whatever, but
Well, clowns are worse, but Santa runs
yeah.
a close second or third behind the Easter Bunny.
All right, so tell us about having Stephen King as your writing teacher.
He
That
came
must have
back,
been very interesting.
boy, he came back to the university he graduated from 9 or 10 years afterwards, and I just happened to be there, and that was my junior year. And I immediately ran down and asked to be in the class, even though I didn't have all the prerequisites. And it was writing. And up till then, I hadn't written hardly anything. And in his class, you had to write 25,000 words in a semester in 12 weeks. And if you
Wow.
haven't done that before, in 2 semesters, that's a novel's length. And boy, does that put the pressure on you to come up with stuff. And when you're young, you don't have all the life experiences. You might have some ideas, but you don't know how to, you don't have the craft behind you. You don't know how to shape things. But I banged out some stories and he would edit them. Sitting in the man's living room while he's going through your story was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Drinking beer with him when he still was doing that back in those days. But he's the
Yeah.
most inspirational teacher. And people are like, what is he like? He's a wonderful, down to earth Mainer. He's got a dry sense of humor, super intelligent. He reads everything, not just scary stuff. He reads everything in the genre. He's made people's careers just with a blurb. So if you're listening, Steve, please yeah,
Oh, I'd
tag me.
love to have Steve on the show. Steve, if you're out there, yeah.
Yeah, if you're out there, please tag one of my books. Thank you. And I always say he was so inspirational about always improving your craft, always trying to do better and write, 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 and read, read, read. That's how you become a better writer. And I took some of that to heart, and over the years, uh, went from bad to good. And like, hey, I could really do something with this. And since 2011, I got my first novel published, and since then I've got like 38 books. So trying to work even harder and get better. The trouble is when you try to do your absolute best with every book, and then you work on the next one and try to do it better, you're
Yeah.
stretching yourself every time you sit down.
Yeah, that's a challenge. So did he have any prerequisites when it came to putting together the writing, or was just write what you wanted to write?
Well, yes, yes, you could. He did not give you subjects or anything like that. He's
Yeah.
just right because that's the type of writer he is. And
Right.
people are like, well, I don't like scary. He's got so much other work than just scary stuff. And he's just like, do a story, do
Yeah.
something that grabs the reader, that makes sense, beginning, middle, end, that has meaning to it. So when you get to the end, you go, there it is. That's a story. Absolutely.
So that one thing that you wrote for him, those 25,000 words,
Well, it wasn't one
do
thing,
you
it was
still
a
have
lot.
that?
I was doing short stories, but I
Yeah.
did do one story that ultimately became the first novel I wrote, but not the first novel I published. It wasn't good enough, and I knew that, but I wasn't good enough to make it what I wanted. So I had to wait until I did other books in between, and then finally some other ideas came together. And I call it when a book finally coalesces into what you want, it snaps together like Lego pieces, and you've got it. And finally, it was good enough, and finally, it was out, and that was Shadow of the Wendigo.
And did you dedicate it to Stephen?
Not that one, but I did dedicate, well, one of my very recent one, Halls of Fear,
Yeah.
to him. Absolutely. Yet I'm getting
Yeah.
to the point where I've done all the dedications. I'm like, ooh, who do I do this one to?
Just pull out the phone book, right? And just kind of
No,
randomly
no,
pick a
no,
name.
no, 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 no.
Okay, so you were on Jeopardy, you said. So what
Yeah.
does it take to get on Jeopardy? It seems like you got to go through a pretty rigorous just to even get on Jeopardy, I would
People
assume.
thought that, and I thought the test was very easy, and everybody else,
Yeah.
oh man, it was hard. And I'm like, really? So I went to an audition in Portland, and they give you a tryout after you take the written test, and then it was like, and you don't know if you're ever going to hear. And I did hear, and I flew out to Los Angeles on my own dime. Now they actually pay you, which
Right.
is, boy, I could have used that, and and then went down in flames on a Boston question at the end, and it's like,
Oh,
you've got to be kidding me. So, two people with no relation to Boston absolutely nailed it. And the guy who's a historian from the Boston area goes, huh? Yeah.
so was that Final Jeopardy they
That was
got you?
Final Jeopardy, right. And they haven't let me come back on. If they let me come back on, I would smoke these people because if you're listening, Ken Jennings, please, again, call me. They don't know anything that happened before they were born. They
Yeah.
have no sense of history or anything in any of the culture. And I'm like, I would just tear through them like a buzzsaw. It's like, wow. So yeah, please get me back on, and I would love to make lots of money.
So, what was Alex Trebek like? Did he interact with people, or was he just pretty
No,
much,
no,
I'm
back
on the
then
show?
he was very, very standoffish, and that was when he was not the kindly Uncle Alex that he later morphed into. He was a
Yeah,
little prickly and
yeah.
standoffish and a little cold, and just felt like he didn't interact like he did later on. I was like, oh, okay, whatever.
All right. So it sounds like you've been writing all your life, but maybe not. So when did you decide, I want to be a writer, or when did you start really writing? Was this go back to your school days? Obviously in
Well, like I
college.
said, King inspired me because I hadn't done much to then, but I did some stories. He liked some of the stuff I did and made some suggestions like, you could think about publication for this one or that one. And I was like, oh, okay. So over the years, life came in between, obviously, but over the years, things happened. But I started with some stories and I wrote one and boom, and it sold. And I was like, oh, yay. And I sold a second one and they were both on the newsstands at the same time. And I went, hey, I've made it. Yeah, but then, then it was a ways. And it was back in the days of, type it up on a typewriter, put it in the mail, put return postage on it, and send it off. And it's like, that was awful. Okay. And then I stopped submitting for a while, kept writing, but stopped submitting. And then the world changed. And
Yeah.
then everything became electronic. And a friend read some of my stories and said, oh, you got to start submitting these. So I started again submitting them and was selling the stories. Meanwhile, I had the novel, I had an agent. They took forever. Nothing happened. And I was like, I'd be dead before I get a book out. So I went with a small press for my first novel and got it out. Went with, stayed with them for another book. And then by my third book, they couldn't keep up fast enough because they had so many other books to get out that I had to go with somebody else. But after 2 years in the business of publishing, I had learned everything they do. And I could do it faster. I could do it better. I could do it cheaper. And I didn't have to mess with any of the problems and issues. And I said, well, let me try independence. So I started putting out some shorter books as experiments, and those did really well. And I said, well, okay. So I went completely independent, got my rights back to all my books, and now form my own publishing company and produce as fast as I want. And I only have to deal with one jerk in the publishing business.
Are you arguing with yourself on the business side of it there?
Oh, all the time. It's like, you should be doing this. You should be doing that. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm one person. No writer I know wants to do marketing. Nobody get into this business because they wanted to market. Okay. They want to write, they want to let somebody else do it. But if you don't market, you don't sell. So I tell them, do a certain extent, but only what doesn't make you bitterly unhappy. But the trouble is, it's a hamster wheel. You hop on that marketing hamster wheel and you got to keep running faster to stay in the same place. And the minute you step off, everything stops, your sales drop, and then you get depressed. So
Yes.
just do what you can do, and you can't do it all. You can't be on 8 social media platforms and keep up with all of them. Running ads is expensive. Hire a publisher if you got the money and you want to throw it away, but maybe they can help. But do the writing. That's the art that makes you happy.
Oh, absolutely. So obviously you were a Stephen King fan. Were there other authors that you enjoyed reading? Were you a big reader
Yeah, I
before you
call
started writing?
I call myself an infomaniac
Yeah.
because I was reading, cereal boxes. I was reading everything, ads in the subway or anything I could get my hands on. Just read, 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 like Stephen King says. But I've always had favorite set of authors. Harlan Ellison is one of the best. He, at the time when he was still alive, had more awards than any other American writer, any other, which is amazing. John D. MacDonald, love his stuff, just absolutely fabulous. The Travis McGee series, which mine is an homage to. Ray Bradbury, absolutely. Robert Heinlein, and now James Lee Burke, Robert Craze. I mean Robert B. Parker, of course. There's so many of them. It's like, pick your favorite. Pick my favorite 200. How about that? Let's go with that.
We only have so much time, right?
No,
Can't name them.
Patricia Highsmith. I mean, it just the list goes on and on.
Well, you mentioned Robert B. Parker. He always was my hero. I always enjoyed him. Behind me, I have lots of Robert B. Parker books on my bookshelf back there. And he passed away 1980, I think it was. It's always interesting to me when someone takes over for these artists or these
Yeah,
authors later on and try to do their voice. And I've had a couple on here. I had Reed Farrell Coleman, who took over for the Jesse Sohn series for
yeah,
several episodes, interviewed him, and I asked him what that was like and the challenge of taking over. And he said he had talked to Ace Atkins, who had taken over for the
right.
Spencer series for a while. And he goes, just write what you want to write. you know,
Yeah.
you're not going to be Robert B. Parker no matter
No,
what you do. So just
although
write your book.
you might like my Zach Taylor series because more than one
Mhm.
professional has it. You write a lot like Robert B. Parker.
Yeah.
It's the same feel of what he was doing. And he was writing the PI novel, which for some has gone out of fashion. But when you're doing it right and you were steeped in that tradition of Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, even Mickey Spillane, Jim Thompson, John D. MacDonald, all these writers, when you've been steeped in that classical mode, you love that world and you write, like you say, what you want to read and what you want to write. And that's what comes out. And people go, reminds me of Robert B. Parker. I'm like, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I have a private eye series too, and it's somewhat like that. And I've had people compare me to Dashiell Hammett and all that, and the Philip Marlowe books and stuff too, because I've always enjoyed that first person private eye through his art. My private eye's got the snarky attitude,
Right.
gets himself in trouble all the time. And my guy isn't always that smart. He's kind of screws up a lot too, which I think that's a similar to a lot of the private eyes where you know they just muddle through it until Spencer all the time was like, I'm just going to keep pissing people off till somebody does something and comes out
Yeah,
of the woodwork.
essentially, yeah, that's what my hero Zach Taylor does. Is
Yeah.
he doesn't always do it right because again, he's an amateur. He doesn't even carry a gun because
Oh
of a
yeah.
past tragedy. I'm like, it's don't make it too easy for your protagonist. And if he doesn't carry a gun, he's going to be a lot more careful about
Right.
who he talks to, when he talks to them, and what's going to happen next. But he was a bouncer. He's a martial artist. He's tough, and he can tell when people are lying, and he can tell when violence is about to happen. So if you're close up, you're never going to get that gun out in time, which is the nice thing. But again, things aren't so easy for him. And there's the law of unintended consequences. I mean, people get hurt and he feels guilty even when it's not his fault. But, violence does leave a stain.
Yes, it does. So you obviously been writing for a long time. You've written a lot of stuff. Do you find writing therapeutic? Do you feel like it's kind of therapeutic for you when you're writing stories?
I always tell people writing is the cheapest and best therapy there is. All you need is a pencil pen and a sheet of paper. And when COVID was in the blackest days of COVID, it looked like we couldn't leave the house. We were all going to die. Everything was bad. Work was going terrible. And it was just like feeling miserable and depressed. I mean, seriously, clinically depressed. And writing brought me out of that. So, absolutely, the act of creation, the act of making something negates that void. And you
Yeah.
really feel like you can come out of it. So, yeah, I do find it exceedingly therapeutic.
So tell us about your books. We talked a little bit about some, and you have a lot of books through the years. So I know the one series is you've got, I think, book 7 just
Book
came out.
7,
Is that
yes, just came out, A Great Reckoning. That's the
Mhm.
Zach Taylor series set in Portland, Maine. There it is. All the books are set in Portland, Maine. They all have a theme. The title, and the theme come from something from literature. A Great Reckoning is something that Shakespeare mentioned in connection with the death of Christopher Marlowe. The beginning book, A Memory of Grief, comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest known story we have. And everything arises from that. And it's a series because I love Portland and I wanted to feature that in a series, LA, Chicago, New York. Everybody does the big city. This
right?
is this is Portland, Maine. there's maybe 2 murders a year, but I increase the body count by many, many, many times. Zach Taylor, who comes there, is from away. He's a fish out of water. These ones, like we talked about making it easy. The PI who's buddies with the cops and always gets the police report and always knows who to call and always has the murderous sidekick to call on to shoot somebody when he needs. I mean, no, that's not what life is. It's more like, you come in and you try to do something and that doesn't work. And you try something else and that doesn't work. And then finally something kind of half works. And then, like you said, if by just hanging around and being annoying, eventually the bad guys make a mistake. They'll like try to get rid of you, or you see something you shouldn't, or, some connection comes into there. And I like that kind of thing. It's the slow stumble into grace instead of the, oh, I know everything and I'll never get hurt and I win every fight kind of thing. Yeah, that's not how life works. Or I'm going to pull out a gun and all my problems are solved. I'm immediately out of trouble. Again, okay, I've been on this planet for a while and I've never had that happen. Okay. That's not how it works. So yes, I love that series. That's my bread and butter, but I've done standalones and I've got over 80 published short stories. And now I have a lot of nonfiction to try and help other writers as well.
So the cover there, is that supposed to be, I don't know if
That is
which
Hercules.
god is that?
Hercules fighting the Hydra.
It is Hercules.
The Hydra is like when he was fighting it, he'd cut off a head and 2 more would grow back. And he's like, how do you fight something like that? And this is my idea because Zach is alone and having to take on a criminal organization with all the power protected, hidden away. They're like a private army. How does he take them on with no resources and by himself? So there's my theme for that, which is, Hercules fighting the Hydra. People like ask him, what do you think you are, Hercules? It's like, I remember Hercules didn't always come to a good end. So that's the fun part of it.
So I know you had, I picked these up off of here. You've got a couple of Zach packs where you've got 3 of the mysteries.
Right. Put that over for people who like a bargain. They can get 3 novels for just a few bucks, price of a Starbucks. And as you see, all the literary quotes start with an A something. And all the covers are a stone angel or a stone figurine that represents the theme of the book. You can tell grief, that's obviously a grieving angel. And grace, that's the avenging angel because you have fallen from grace. And then a shadow on the wall, it's a very shadowy figure. It's from Plato's Cave and from the theories of Jung, our shadow self, that sort of thing. So everything is thematic, which is great because it all ties together.
And then you have the second pack, which is really small there. Let me get that bigger here.
There we go. And big in it. Yep. Oh, the nice thing about A Certain Slant of Light, which is an Emily Dickinson quote, looking at that figure, my daughter took that picture in Notre Dame Cathedral before the fire. And I looked at the picture she took and I said, oh, that's got to be one of my covers right there. Oh, and it's Emily Dickinson was writing about death and how that certain slant of light illuminates. And I'm like, oh, that's just beautiful. A Sharp Medicine was the final words of Sir Walter Raleigh as he's being led to the scaffold where his head's going to be removed. He goes, well, that's a sharp medicine for all my ills. And I go, now that's panache, baby. That's wow. To go out with a line like that. Great. And then A Darkened Room is from a Nathaniel Hawthorne quote, which is just eerie and dramatic. And that's how the book opens, with looking through and seeing in a darkened room the one beam of light which illuminates a dead man and a chair. And I'm like, wow. When you do that, the beginning just is great. It doesn't write itself, but man, it's right there for you. It's like, oh boy, jump in. There's gold in them Nar Hills.
So you said Zach was not a professional private eye, right?
Correct. He actually has a short stint in prison because he hit the wrong person and had to go to prison. So he can't get a license. And he never set out to be an investigator. He gets into it accidentally when his friend is killed. And he comes to Maine to find out what happened. and all he has is a search for the truth. But with his record, the police don't like him, don't believe him, don't want to deal with him. He has nobody to rely on. He's total fish out of water. But he's got to find out when nobody wants to talk about bad things that happened, and he's got to deal with this different world. He was hanging around some organized crime figures. He didn't do anything bad. He was just a bodyguard, but he can tell when people are lying, and he's just persistent enough to be so annoying that sometimes he'll find out the information. But boy, is it a struggle.
So is it written in first person or third person?
Yes, I do love the traditional, like you say, the traditional private eye first person. It's very immediate. The danger is always there. You see their thoughts.
Right.
I have written other books in third person, so absolutely, definitely no problem going there. But this series is homage, like I say, to the Travis McGee series of John D. MacDonald, which I absolutely love. And you go around the world and people still go, "Oh, I remember that." I did get to meet MacDonald's grandson, Andrew MacDonald, who is a wonderful person. Loves to hear when he goes around the world, people say, "Oh, the works of your grandfather, absolutely, they changed my life. I mean, they mean so much. I still love them."
Right.
He enjoys hearing that from people.
So you've got more planned for the series?
Not planned yet. I keep files on potential things for the future. I haven't got a particular title for number 8 because I've got a whole list of potentials. Things have to come together. I'm not one of those who is very deliberate and writes every day. I do court the muse, who sometimes is kind enough to come up and slap me upside the head and say, "This now." In fact, I've been working on a bunch of other books, and like last week, I think, or the week before, the muse came in and said, "Guess what? You're doing this one." I go, "That's all I've got is 2 names and an idea." "Well, you're doing this now." And I'm like, "Yes, yes, okay." You do not argue with the muse. Absolutely. It's whatever comes out. I like it because King mentioned this. He says writers write from the subconscious. That's where the good stuff is. He says you go down with a bucket down into mankind's myth pool in the dark, deep caverns underneath, and you dip that bucket in the water, and you don't know what comes up, and it's black, and you come back up into the light, and then you examine what you've got. But that of the Jungian myth pool is where the good stuff is, the subconscious that all comes together. And what matters, you can give people chills, you can make them laugh, you can make them cry, you can make them just go, "Damn, that was a fine story."
Yeah, that's good. So you've written a lot of short stories. I think you said over 80.
Yeah, I've published over 80. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of a little bit of a lost art. You don't see a lot of people writing stories. And what is it you liked about writing a short story then?
Yes, the traditional publishers don't like short story collections
Right.
because they do not sell as well
Right.
as other books. So the most writers don't like to do them except as one-offs. I love the short story form because that's the palate cleanser of sherbet between the long books. If you're working on a book, it could be months to years. The short story is bang, you can get that done in a day, a 2, a week, a shorter period of time, and you have an idea going from start to finish that explores a particular thing. And it's as Poe said, a short story should go from in one sitting, read it through, and everything works toward that particular ending when they go, "Ah, that's it." It's all mattered right up to that point. And I love doing that. And I love putting in some Easter eggs. And you can do a lot more. You don't know what kind of genre it's going to be. When I start off, it's not always like, "Oh, I know exactly where this is going." It's just sometimes an idea, sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's a character, and it comes out. And sometimes it's beautiful. And I compare it to life. They go, like, "Where do you get your ideas?" I go, "Well, life. I mean, everything you hear, everything you see, people you see on the street, things you hear." I passed 2 people one day, and all I heard from their conversation was there was no sign of forcible entry. And I went, "Oh boy, there you go." So I went home and I wrote a story of that. 2 police going, "Well, that's kind of odd. Her husband was killed, but there was no sign of forcible entry." And stories come out of that. So I say it's a big sausage machine. There's this big grinder, and you throw in everything that you've experienced, everything you've imagined, everything you've heard, all these characters, and you grind it up and you add some spice. And what comes out, you never know exactly what it's going to be. But a lot of times it's good. And you go, yeah, I like that. That's what short stories are about. It's that jolt, that charge. Oh, and it's so good when they sell, because it's tough selling that. But when a cash-strapped editor gives you money for a story when they've got hundreds of submissions and they choose yours for the 12 stories in that issue and they send you a check, you've done something right.
So, do any of your short stories cross over into each other, different characters, or are they all just unique, every
I'm
one
going
of
to
them?
be exploring that more. I haven't mostly. I think I've done it a couple of times, but I'm definitely going to be doing more if I'm allowed to continue and stay in long enough to keep going. I've got a story file of about 600 titles and ideas, and I just have to just write faster.
Well, that's always the challenge. So, yeah, you mentioned that you kind of just when you have ideas, and I have, of course, my little notebook here that I keep
There you go. Yes, absolutely.
writing stuff down. So, I'm sure you've got that as well. Those little
Yes.
ideas that you're kind of
Yeah. First they
sitting.
go on paper, and then they get transferred to spreadsheets and files and files and files. So yeah, I love the computer age because boy, that saved a lot of trees. I'll tell you.
I still like writing them down, though my biggest problem is my handwriting is so terrible these days. Sometimes I write them down and I'm like, okay, what the heck am I
As long as
saying?
you can read it, I know that's the trouble. But it is a different skill. Writing by hand engages your mind in a different fashion than typing
Yeah,
on a computer. And
yeah.
so I'm a firm believer in do whatever works for you. And I like sometimes writing by hand and then later editing, on a word processor because you're using all the different aspects of it.
Yeah, I think I've talked to maybe one author who still handwrites some of their books, at least their outlines. Sometimes they'll do
Uh,
the outline in hand, and then they'll start doing the story, but they like to handwrite their outlines in advance instead
Absolutely.
of typing them.
I tell
So,
writers whatever works, whatever it takes to get that story out, except neglecting your family. Do not do that.
well, you have to hole yourself up in a room sometimes. I'm always impressed with, well, I don't know if I'm impressed, but I'm always surprised when authors talk about how they can write and they're listening to music at the same time or the TV's on in the background or whatever. I have to have total silence to write. My brain cannot handle multiple things getting thrown at me at the same time. I
I
don't know
use
about
I
you.
use white noise quote music, but it's just
Yeah,
there's no rhythm or melody. It's just mostly white noise. Now, one of my
yeah,
favorites, as I mentioned, Harlan Ellison, he tried to demystify writing because some people would treat it as a magical act. And he would write in store windows. He'd go into a bookstore, sit down with a typewriter, put a piece of paper, and said, "Give me an idea." Somebody would throw an idea at him, and he was off and running. And a lot of
right.
times would have a published story come out of it, which is amazing. Louis L'Amour said he could write on a street corner. Like, nope, nope. Give me my room, give me silence and a block of time. Boom, I'll come up with something.
Well, we were talking before the show about Bruce Coffin, and his wife drives him to all these events he goes to, and he's typing away on his computer on his laptop while she's driving him everywhere. And I'm always amazed that he can concentrate with the car and maybe the stereo on or whatever while she's driving all the time.
I
So
can't. I just can't. Yeah,
a lot of trust there, I'm sure, in the wife and how good a driver she is
that's for
too.
sure. Well,
So
Karen's terrific. So, and a very
yeah,
supportive spouse, which is great.
yeah. So I think we kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I'll ask you anyway. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
I was much more a pantser until like the last year or two. I've become more of a plotter because for some books, using a structure really helps because there's what's called the beat structure of the things that happen. And some of the great stories that we know, the inciting incident, it's the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell. You have the, the showing their world beforehand. And then there's an inciting incident, which, oh, they have to, A, probably leave, quote, the farm or whatever. They must go out into the world and tackle things to get some kind of information, to fix a problem, to save the day, sort of thing. They encounter obstacles. They look at what's going to happen. They try something and it fails miserably. Okay, so they have to try other things. There's setbacks, but then it becomes the journey. Think, oh, Lord of the Rings. They're on this very long, epic journey, and there's so many setbacks and so many dangers, and sometimes there's slight wins. But they have this goal in mind of getting to the end, and that's it. And when the hero's journey, the hero comes back with the knowledge of how to defeat the monster, save the day, do whatever, having defeated their internal monsters as well as any potential external monsters. That helps a lot to have this structure to show you what needs to happen. When I start a book, everything's jumbled, right? There's a scene here, there's a scene there. I don't know where they're going to be. I start plugging them into a spreadsheet in various locations, and sometimes one will prompt you to what happens next. Oh, here's the scene where he goes and talks to this person. Well, that's going to cause the next scene where this happens now that he has that information. Boom. And so on and so forth. And if you're using that beat structure, you see 3 chapters where it's just talk. You're like, there's no action there. I can't have that. I got to do something. And as the structure begins to show itself, the bones start to go there. You can set them down. And when all the bones are there, you can start adding flesh to them and flesh it out. So Pantser plotter, yes, both, which is, I find, actually pretty common among a lot of writers. Some are very strict, but if you as a writer know everything that's going to happen in your story, doesn't that sound like kind of boring to write? Because you're not getting surprised. I'm like, if you, the writer, are surprised, the reader's going to be surprised, and that's what they want.
Well, I'm a total pantster, and I kind of discover things with my characters along the way. It's just like everyday life. You walk out the door, you don't know what's going to happen sometimes, and that's kind of the way I've always written. Doesn't always work right sometimes, and sometimes you got to fix some things down the line.
Oh yeah, and you can get
That's just the way my brain's always worked.
Yeah, you get this great start, it's going to end, but you get stuck in the middle. And structure really helps that. Not like formula, you're not like ABC, this, and this, but it gives you an idea of what could be happening to get you from point A to point F,
Right. So when you do plot, do you feel like you need to follow it, or you feel
Oh,
it's
no,
pretty
absolutely.
flexible?
No.
Yeah.
To me, the story tells you what it's going to do. I've been completely surprised. I had in book 2 of the Zach Taylor series a character come in that wasn't even in the first draft. Suddenly she appears, and then suddenly she takes over the book. I'm like, wow, okay. You don't argue. You just don't. When it's right, it's right. And like I said, it's those Lego pieces snapping together. And you look at it, it's like, man, that's so tight, but it works. Everything's woven together, and that's lovely. That's part of the fun of the writing when that happens.
Yeah, I always like that. I always tell people that the characters are sometimes in the room with me, and they're like, "I want a bigger part." So that kind of sounded like what happened with yours. Is there? No,
Oh
I
yeah.
need to be in this book more.
And I don't tell them what to say. They tell me what they're gonna say.
That's right. Those ghosts that just play in your head. I wanted to do a keynote this year at Killer Nashville, but Clay didn't pick me. But I was going to talk about the psychosis or this of being a pantster, and all the things that are kind of going on all the time. Writing stories and stuff for us.
Yeah, I
So
tell people, I go, look, in the past we would have been locked up. We've got voices in our head, but the faucet is always on.
yeah,
I had just this year, I had a story come at 3 in the morning. Bang. It's a good one. And I sent it off to Alfred Hitchcock, still waiting to hear. I
yeah.
had 11 o'clock at night. Bam. Another story come to me. It's like, wrote that the next day, sent it off. That's sold. And now the idea for this book, just recently, just bam, 11 o'clock at night. Hey, you need to write about this and this. And I'm like, yeah, but what about this other stuff? Yeah, do this right now. You don't know, but you got to listen because that faucet is on, and you got to, grab a surfboard and go with the tide to mix my metaphors.
So you mentioned you're not diligent about writing every day,
Correct.
but do you try not to? Are you like a streak writer where it kind of just flows out of you all at once, and then you kind of take a break for a while and
A
get
lot of
exhausted?
times, yeah, I'm the worst example of people to try to emulate because I tell people, I sit down and remember, I want people to be productive. I go, look, I am terribly lazy and the worst undisciplined writer you ever want to meet. And I don't write every day. And sometimes there's periods. But yet I've got 38 books out since 2011. Okay. If I can do that, you sure as heck can do that. Okay. Get your butt in the chair, 1,000 words a day or more, get it done and keep going. I try, but life is so messy. It just happens, So, and I feel a little guilty, but not too much because I know, hey, it happens. And again, I've got a body of work that most people would envy that they've never been able to do in a lot longer in their lifetimes. And if I'm given a couple more years, I can do a lot more. And if somebody lazy can do that, just think of what somebody who's focused and diligent can do.
Well, and you're your own boss, so you can
Oh,
make
you're
your own
such a
ideas, right?
jerk. Yeah, but he will give me a day off if I need it.
That's that's good. So, is there a book you want to write that you haven't written yet? And I know
Yeah,
you got a whole big book thing full of ideas, so
yeah.
I'm sure there's probably a whole bunch, but maybe something in a totally different genre than what you've
Oh,
written. I know
that's
you
it.
said you have some
The
horror.
next few books are totally non-genre, and it's going to be stretching myself way beyond what I can do at this present day. But that's writing is learning by doing, and these books just have to get written, and including this most recent one. I was like, oh man, I don't know how to do a book like that, without the laying back on the structure of the crime novel or the horror novel or the suspense or whatever it is. It's like this is totally new territory, and I love it. This is what an artist has to do: is continually stretch themselves, and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to write a bad book because you can always edit something you've written. You can't edit a blank page. And writing this kind of thing just makes you a better writer. Absolutely.
So I know you have some nonfiction. I know you have a book there that's kind of I don't know if you want to say it's a how-to or tips for writers or for authors, wannabe authors and stuff as well. If you want to plug that a little bit, maybe throw a couple of the tips out there that are in that book for
Oh,
people.
sure do. Because I wrote the book and then I brought it to a conference, a couple of years back, and one of the professional traditional authors said, "Well, how did you come to write this book?" And I said, "20 years of research." And she was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Because going to conferences, being in writer groups, hanging out with writers, being in the business for so long, people keep asking the same questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I get a publisher? How do I get an agent? How do I do this and that and the other? And I took all that information and put it in a book telling them how to do it, start to finish, how to choose your path from traditional or independent or going with small press. And then at the end, I've got like pages and pages and pages of additional resources, which alone are worth the price of the book. And then,
Hmm.
and somebody says, well, what about this? They ask a question, and I basically take out the book and go, it's all in here. Okay, it's $4.99 as an ebook, so you really can't go broke. For the price of a coffee, you can get all your questions answered. And if you read this and you still got a question after all of that, email me. So it's how to be a successful indie writer. And people are like, well, you can't get your books into bookstores. I go, really? I'm in Barnes and Nobles. I'm in bookstores all over New England. Yes, you can. Well, you can't do this. You can't get into Barnes and Nobles. Yeah, I've done signings at Barnes and Nobles. I've got my books in Barnes and Nobles. You can do it. Even if you're strictly Amazon, you can do it. And I tell you how to do that. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, okay. So a lot of the myths of the traditional world are still hanging around. Oh, you can't make any money as an independent. Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you'll never sell. You'll never XYZ. And the thing is, you know, I tell these authors, oh, I only sold a couple hundred copies. They said about 95% of all published books, whether traditional or independent, don't sell any more than between a couple dozen and 200 copies. That's most of them. Okay. So already, if you set out to publish a book, you're destined to fail. Great. Now, with that knowledge, go forth and do it anyway.
That's right.
And it's amazing to see the difference in mindset and the framing of what people do, because you just change their expectations from like, oh, if I'm not making money, I must be a failure. No, no, it's the business that's the failure. I go, look, okay, Vincent van Gogh. How many paintings did he sell in his lifetime? He sold one, and that
Yeah.
was to his brother who owned a gallery. So I tell these authors who are, crying, I go, if you have sold one book to a complete stranger, you are more successful than Vincent van Gogh was in his lifetime. And they're like, whoa. And I go, okay, so you never know if your books are going to take off in 10, 20, 30 years or more. You don't know. You might find your audience years down the road, but you got to get that work out. Vincent van Gogh wasn't selling, but he had to paint, paint, paint. He had the vision. He had to get it out there. The voices in his head said, you must do this. A writer has to be that obsessive if they really want to be successful. Butt in chair, fingers on keyboard, write, write, write. You don't become a concert violinist by practicing 5 minutes a day, right? Even the top concert violinists are still doing 3 hours of practice minimum a day. And you're like, well, practice, you should know how to do it. Yeah, but I'm trying to get better. Isaac Stern, I think, said that.
So, have you ever thought about writing a follow-up to add more to that book there,
Well,
uh,
I
what you've learned in these last? Because that came out what, like 2010 or something like that?
no,
Is
no,
that
no, not that long ago.
wasn't that long ago?
2015, I think, something. But
15. Okay.
but it answered all the questions, except
Yeah.
for how do I sell more? So I wrote the follow-up, 87 ways to sell more books. And so when they ask, well, how do I, and then I hand them that book.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if you got any questions after that, let me know. It doesn't really need a complete update yet. And again,
Yeah.
there's so much more to write that I want to get out that
Sure.
I try not to rehash all of it, but I have been redoing and updating some of my works this summer. So that's been a lot of work. So
Keeps you out of trouble, right?
boy, I'd love to have some time to get into trouble.
So, are any of your books based on real people or real events?
No, and you will see that disclaimer at the start of all my books. This is a
Mhm.
work of fiction. This keeps a writer out of court. I just had somebody else that was on a podcast and she said, "Oh, this is based on this person and this." I said, "Whatever you do, take all that out and put this disclaimer at the start. This is a work of fiction. You do not want to get sued, and no matter what it says in there, somebody's going to try to get money out of you by taking you to court, and you just do not want any of that."
Yes, you're right. It does happen a lot out there. So, we're getting down here about 10 minutes or so left. So, uh, you've already kind of given us some advice. What about marketing? That's always, especially for an independent, self-published author, marketing is the biggest challenge. And I know I've talked to some authors, and of course they're with the more traditional published, and they're like, my job's to write the book. It's their job to promote it.
Yeah, but
But as an
they don't
indie
know.
author, that isn't the case. So,
That's the trouble is that
yeah.
I've got successful friends in the traditional world, and they get maybe 20 to 25,000 for an advance, and the book sells no more than 20,000 copies. And they ask the publisher, well, what's the difference between me and somebody who sells, a lot? And they go, you basically are kind of ceilinged at the 20,000 until you hit to the 250,000 and above, unless you're the James Patterson, the Stephen King, and one of those. It's the money they put in to the machine of getting the word out. Like James Patterson was a marketer, and that's why he knows how to get the word out, because that's what his team does for him. His team actually writes the books for him now too. So
Yeah, his name is on the book, and there's
yeah,
always another author.
I don't like that. To me, that's false
Yeah.
advertising. But that's another kettle of fish. But yeah, marketing is the toughest job in the world. That's why I wrote 87 ways to sell more books. And again, in the back, there's resources and resources and resources. I'm like, but don't try to do too much. Always ask yourself the acronym WIBBO, WIBBOW. Would I be better off writing? Okay. And as they say, the best way to sell a book is to write another one and get that book out there. Get the information out there. Get your work out to the world. If you've got a store, your brand, your store only has one book in it. Somebody walks into your store and sees the one item there, and they're like, okay, that's nice, but they walk out. But if they walk into the store and they see a couple of shelves worth of stuff, okay, you've got a better chance of them buying something and doing more. And that's why I put all the resources in, because nobody knows it all. Nobody can do it all. But there are a lot of people who have successfully done things that work. And I put them all out for you. And if you study those and say, "Ooh, I could do that. I could try that." Experiment, find out what works, and go for it. And continue and do more. Nothing's
Well,
fatal.
not everything works for every person either. Some things
Right.
work.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I talked to a successful writer, Killer Nashville, Kirsten Moglen, and who
Yeah.
has successfully nailed the algorithm for her series of books. And I asked her, I said, "Well, what can I do?" She said, "It's more difficult for you because you write in different genres. So your also bots are not coming up with the same thing in the same line for the same people and the same audience. It's just not the same. It's not going to work as well." Thank you.
Right.
That's what I need to
Right.
know. The algorithms are completely different.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, Kristen. I've been trying to get Kristen on the show, but she kind of says I'm pulling back from stuff right now. So,
Yeah, she's doing a book a month. I don't think she's got a lot of spare time. Plus,
oh,
with
yeah,
raising her family. Yeah.
she's so busy these days. Yes. So I know you do a lot of author events through the years. You've been to Killer Nashville. I know you didn't weren't able to make it this year, but you were just up in Maine for a big one.
The main
Do you
crime
recommend
wave.
trying to do certain events, big events around the country for
Yes,
people that
I
are
love the big
aspiring?
events. However, now that I'm retired, I'm living on Social Security. So if that is taken away, I suddenly will
Okay.
have far fewer funds. So I have
Yeah.
to be very careful about what I do. I've been to a bunch of voucher cons, and I really like them. Although being a little fish in a big pond doesn't always give you the best return on investment.
Right.
We've had the Crime Bake up here in New England, which is fantastic, a 250-person event every year. I've learned a lot from that, but now it's mostly repetitious for me when I see these panels, and I could give pretty much most of them. And so the learning aspect isn't there. It's nice to go and see all your friends, but there's also the cost. Now,
That's
Killer
it.
Nashville, I've loved. I've been 3 times, and I absolutely think that's the best one for me at my stage and for a lot of writers, because if you go there, that spending just about 3 to 4 days at Killer Nashville is going to up your game. In D&D, it's called leveling up. You're going to just jump class of class of class, because you'll learn so much in that time. You will make so many connections by networking. You'll get so many opportunities. From Killer Nashville last year, I got your show out of that, plus 3 others. I mean, just people coming up and saying, "I liked what you said. Could you come on my show and say some more of that?" Absolutely. Um, you get to not only sell books, you get to talk to people, you get to present, you get to learn, and you get to hang out and have fun. It's just a great party. We hang out in the section outside the restaurant, and we just talk for hours. The first one I went to, 2016, I think, Joe Conrath was there, who was the guru of indie publishing at the time, and he didn't go to any more conventions. He said, I've said everything. That's it. He came there. So I said, "Wow, I found a unicorn." And and just said that, "Thank you for everything you've done." We wound up like talking all weekend till like 3 in the morning. It was just amazing. The most amazing experience you could have. You get to sit side by side with the pros and talk business with them as an equal. Try going to the All-Star game and seeing if you can bat next to one of these guys. It's not going to happen. But you can go and talk business with some of the top people in the business at these conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. And Killer Nashville is a great learning conference. If you're an aspiring author, you're going to get a lot out of it. And every year, just be prepared to be tired when it's over with, because it's
Well,
3, 4 really long days.
writers are introverts, and even someone like me who is kind of half and half. But after a conference like that, I need days to chill out, to calm down, to
Yeah.
decompress, to recharge. Because yeah, it's a lot. Trying to be nice to people for like 3 days straight, that's just not in my handbook. I mean, yeah,
Not for your family, right? We hope you're nice to your family all the time, right?
that's it. Don't see them that often. So
Okay, so we've got. You have any events coming up that you're planning on doing down the road?
well, the main crime wave just happened, and again, I'm just getting over that because that it was a very intensive 1 day thing. I had to get up at 5 in the morning and drive up to Maine, and then
Yeah.
go all day and then drive back. Yes, I have a big selling event in October that we have in New Hampshire, which is a huge craft fair. But thousands of people come by. So I get a table I set up. And again,
Yeah.
like you say, for an entire week, and I have to be nice to everybody who comes by. Again, not easy. Then I need some downtime. I just signed up today. I got contacted by a bookstore, says the only date we have available is a week from Sunday. So I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. Okay, great. So I start contacting some other writers because when I get into a place, I want to help other writers. And I say, hey, would you like to join me for the signing? So I've been doing that all afternoon, trying to get people organized and into that so we can all sell, we can have a great time, and we can make it Spooktober. A bunch of writers of scary stories. So
Right.
3 or 4 of us will sit there at a table, have some nice table decorations, and talk to the fans of the who come into this bookstore and try to sell them some of our stuff for Halloween.
You gonna have candy at your table too?
Sometimes you got to check on the rules of that. Some stores allow it, some don't, and some
Yeah.
craft fairs because they have food vendors, so they don't actually allow it. It's always nice to have something out there that people can stop and take something and walk away. Yeah, candies are great, and even if the kids come up and get it, you're like, absolutely, come on up. So everything's different though. Every show is different. That's the great thing. But if you put yourself out there, you never know which one's going to be the really cool opportunity that came along because you were there.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always done. I do a lot of craft shows, especially during the holiday season, high
Yeah.
schools,
Yeah. Oh,
churches,
yeah.
whatever.
December is like, wow. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're really great because a lot of times I'm the only author, or maybe one or two authors, and
Right.
when you go to author events, of course, you're competing against hundreds of other authors,
Right.
so that's always a challenge.
Well, if you're at a farmer's market and there's 8 people selling tomatoes, but you got pineapples,
Yeah.
that's it. Nobody else has got the pineapple. You betcha.
Okay, so I'm gonna put your website up here.
Thank
Is this
you.
the best place for people to
That
get
is
in touch with
absolutely
you?
the best place, even if I haven't updated as much as I should. But again, I do things so fast I can't even catch up with myself. That's the hard part. Yes, that's the best spot.
And are you on various social media as
Yes, I
well?
am. I'm on Facebook, Dale T. Phillips, and I also have a blog, which I put all the current information on there. It's like, here's another show, here's another appearance, here's this book coming out, here's some fun stuff, here's the conference I just went to, that kind of thing. Dale T. Phillips at blogspot.com, I think.
Is that something that you can, like a newsletter you sign up for and you get it sent to you
You
automatically?
can. I have that
Yeah.
option on my website, and if you do, you get freebies and cheap stuff. So but I don't try to force everybody like a lot of these social
Right.
media advisors say, oh, just bombard people with buy my book and spam. And I don't do that. I don't believe
Yeah.
in that.
Great. All right. Well, was there anything else you wanted to mention, talk about? I think we covered most everything, but I
Yeah,
could have
thank you
missed.
so much for this opportunity. And like I say, it's great because so many writers sit in the dark alone and they feel alone. They feel like nobody gets them, nobody understands, nobody knows. Folks, connect with other writers, with writer groups, go to these conferences. Be happy by finding other people of your tribe. who get what you do, who also have the voices in their head, who know how tough this game is. And that's what I'm always trying to do, is get that hand up and help them up. Get the ladders down so everybody else can come on up. I hate to use the phrase, but the rising tide does lift all the boats. So get some water in there and help everybody out, because this is a tough gig, folks. But set your expectations, know the business, work hard, work at your craft, be happy, and help others.
Well, as I tell most people, I said, do it because you love it and you have a passion for it. And if you make money, great, but don't expect that you're going to be a billionaire like, the few that are, right? Or millionaires, I guess.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
all right, great, Dale. Thank you. I appreciate you joining us for the show. And we may run into you at Killer Nashville in the future. We'll see. We're going to
I'm
talk a
hoping to
little
be
bit
there
about
next year.
Bouchercon.
I'm very much hoping to be there next year. So,
Yeah. What about Bouchercon in Calgary? Any thoughts on if you're going to try to get?
Calgary
That's a
is
long ways for
my
you.
on my destination list of vacation places.
Yeah.
Toronto was great. We drove there. New Orleans was great. I flew down, loved it. St. Petersburg, yeah. Calgary, not as much.
Well, and it's the end of October too,
I
so the
know,
weather,
I know. But hey,
it seemed like an odd time to hold it, but
DC area in 27 could
27.
happen.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too bad of a drive for you. So, okay, great. Well, thank you, Dale. Best of luck to you. We will see you down the road at various events.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. My next show is going to be next week at on the Tuesday, so week and a day from now, and I'm going to have Margaret Mishishima on. She's going to be talking about her brand new book. She actually asked to be on. She's actually be the first guest I've had who's been on more than once. So, but she's like, "Would you mind being on? I want to promote my new book." So I said, "Sure, Margaret. You're a big author, absolutely." So, thanks so much. So, but we will see you then. The event is going to be like I said, Tuesday at 6 p.m., and we'll talk to you then.